Today on Behind the Screen, we present the Hollywood Reporter's annual Cinematographer Roundtable, which was recorded remotely on November 8th. I'm Carolyn Giardina. Let's meet our guests. Welcome and thanks for participating in the Cinematographer Roundtable.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Would you introduce yourselves? Alice, would you like to start?
I'm Alice Brooks, and I'm the cinematographer for In the Heights and Tick, Tick, Boom.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Chung-hoon. I shot last night Soho.
Hi, I'm Bruno Delbonnel. I was the cinematographer for the Tragedy of Macbeth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greig Fraser. I'm the DP on Dune.
Hi, my name is Janusz Kaminski. I'm the DP on West Side Story.
Hi, everyone. My name's Haris Zambarloukos, and I was the DP on Belfast.
Hi, I'm Ari Wegner, and I shot The Power of the Dog.
How do all of you feel seeing your movies projected in theaters again?
It's amazing. I mean, it was In the Heights was one of the first movies to be able to have a real premiere in June, and it was the first movie I got to see. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she came with me, and just being in a dark room and smelling the popcorn and the lights dimming and sharing an experience with people you know and also strangers. Just it was very emotional.
I was overwhelmed actually when I saw Dune because I was sitting by myself in an IMAX theater to review the film, and I actually genuinely did not think that we were going to be going to see the film in the theaters at that point in time. Like there was that whole off on again thing, there was shutdowns, and I genuinely was sitting there with this kind of deep, dark fear that these films would not get to be seen in the theater, which was horrifying for me. So the fact that they are is like uplifting.
All right, well, let's talk about your films. We have several musicals. Alice, would you like to start by telling us about working with Lin-Manuel Miranda to conceive the theatrical look of Tick, Tick, Boom, which was his featured directorial debut?
So Lynn and I met on In the Heights, and we met on and the last day of shooting on Friday, my agent called and said, Lynn would like you to read his script, Tick, Tick, Boom, and have a meeting on Tuesday. And so we wrapped, and I very quickly started reading the script and preparing images to start talking, a lookbook to start talking about the look of the film. And the movie is about Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent, the musical Rent. And it takes place in 1990, New York City. And Jonathan Larson lived in a tenement apartment with a bathtub in the kitchen, 5th floor walk up, and had this incredible artist life where his friends were really his family. And in 1990, I was 10 years old. Lynn and I are the same age, and my father was a playwright, and our house was filled with all his artist friends. And I lived in a tenement apartment. We had a bathtub in the kitchen, 300 square feet, with a dog, 2 cats, my parents and my sister. So 4 of us living in this very small space. And we left New York when I was 10 and moved to Los Angeles. And so immediately reading the script, I had this incredible connection to the material. And I knew very little about Jonathan Larson except for Rent. And so the first page of my lookbook ended up being my family photos. And I was showing Lynn during our first meeting. It was over Zoom. And he said, after a few minutes, he's like, wait, you're showing me your own photographs of your childhood? And I said, yes. And from that moment on, we started, it just was this very, very easy conversation where we just started creating as if I were going to shoot his movie. And Lynn wanted New York City to feel like what he remembered the West Village being when he was 10 in 1990. And I had that memory, and that memory was really ingrained in me in the mind of a 10-year-old, where color and light and emotions are heightened. And Jonathan Larson's this very childlike human being, and and so sometimes the lines between dreams and reality are blurred. And that was our jumping off point. That was our creating point for making Tick, Tick, Boom, was finding the musical within that childlike mind and the blurriness between reality and dreams.
And you also filmed In the Heights for John Chu.
Yes, I did. And John, it's two very different relationships because John and I have known each other for 20 years. John and I had this long collaboration. So it was very, very easy to have this jumping off point for In the Heights. And I got to New York in the middle of winter, and we started to dream about what summer in New York City would look like. And as we were in New York, we started falling in love with the community, and we started being inspired by the community itself. And we found this Instagram feed called Uptown Collective, which really inspired the look of the film. And there's New York street photographers in Washington Heights. And we created the look of In the Heights from wanting things to feel very real at moments and intimate at moments, and then having this big epic, and then going into these big epic musical numbers. And so that, in a nutshell, that's what it was.
So Janusz, you and Steven Spielberg approached your film knowing that the 1961 West Side Story is obviously such a classic. Would you talk about how you approached that challenge?
Well, I think my reference was not the movie. My reference was probably the knowledge of what the original Broadway performance would have looked like. So automatically, because it was a Broadway performance, the sense of reality had to be not necessarily altered because it was a Broadway performance, but it's a musical. So the moment you have people in an environment and they sing, you are entering a completely different world of not fantasy, but just world of the musical. And this was really stimulating for all of us. It was stimulating for Steven, it was stimulating for me, for all the actors and dancers, simply because we had a chance to create a musical on such a scale that did play homage to classical Broadway performance. And automatically that concept and the time frame and the costumes and the music did drive the whole visual concept and execution of the movie. So it was something very new, definitely for Steven and for I, and very invigorating and very positively surprising to us how difficult it is to make musical, and at the same time, how enjoyable it is.
And how much of it was shot on location in New York versus on stages?
Oh boy, we shot primarily on location in the streets of Harlem, Brooklyn, Bronx, Manhattan. We shot for a few weeks in a studio, but I would say the movie was primarily based on location, streets of New York. Of course, we've turned those streets into movie sets because we had to redress and create this whole world of New York of 1957, 1958. The Puerto Rican neighborhood really doesn't exist anymore in New York. In fact, a lot of the New York doesn't exist. So, I mean, it still exists, the buildings exist, but we ended up, as we all know, with period movies, you start bringing cars and street signs and decorating the window displays, and you're turning that into the city. What I meant is the Manhattan doesn't exist of that particular time, but you go to Harlem, you go to Bronx, the buildings are there, and it's pretty spectacular to be surrounded by people who are, cohabiting in those buildings, in the environments. It completely opens up your mind towards what the life is right now in New York, and what, particularly for me, what I understood the life was from the movies, particularly the movies from the 70s, where clearly those neighborhoods were portrayed in a very, very cliche, stereotypical way. And to learn that the movies were not fair representation of what the life looks like there was a big eye-opening. Unfortunately, we were biased by the stories that I was watching. And to see people having wonderful lives in Puerto Rican communities and South American communities was just a great joy to experience.
Would you talk about how your approach to lensing maybe one of the more iconic scenes, such as the one when Tony meets Maria on the fire escape?
Sure. The song is so beautiful. So we were all looking forward to actually working that song. And it's a rather long song and starts in several different locations. But the principle of the idea is to reflect the possibility of the romance and love that is brewing between these two people. So clearly the lighting would reflect that kind of a romance and that kind of a fantasy moment in their lives. It was a combination of doing live photography in tenement building in I think we were in South Harlem, or maybe we were in Bronx. We found this beautiful building that had amazing courtyard with the staircases and with rope crossing from one side to another for the laundry. And it was just a really spectacular place. And we shot that for about 2 nights. And then we've built our own facade on the stage at the Brooklyn shipyard, simply because we had a freedom to stay there all night or all day. And we didn't have to worry about disturbing the neighborhood. And also because of the safety involved in the particular scene where Ansel, Tony, has to climb across the facade of the staircases to meet her. We had to put in the wires and all that. So all the logistics, all the logistic approach made us to build a set on the stage. And I just saw the movie. I just walked out of the movie. I didn't walk out from the movie. I finished watching the movie for the first time. And I was just very impressed by collaborative effort of the whole movie. The dancing is just mind-blowing. I mean, those ladies and guys are just so, just mind-blowing. It just was like completely taken into a different time frame. And it is a different time frame. No, we don't make movies like that anymore. Everyone is so like, it's what I remember as a young man watching American movies. This is took me into that particular time frame. So it's wonderful. It's a great story. It's a classical love story, and by God, has no grounding in reality in terms of the visual panache. The story, the content of the story, of course, it's relevant to what we all experiencing: the racism, the prejudice, the love stories, I haven't experienced death to that extent, but emotional death that we experience is very relevant to what those characters were going. But other than that, it's just a beautiful, beautiful classical homage to classical musicals.
And Greg, Dune was your first pairing with Denis Villeneuve, and you shot on locations in countries including Jordan and Abu Dhabi. What was the most challenging location and why?
Well, it's always challenging when you move away from your comfort base, and generally on a shoot with lots of sets, the comfort base is where your infrastructure is. So we had a lot of challenges in Budapest. We shot in Hungary for a lot of the interiors, but we did a month on location in Jordan, and Jordan is I've been there 3 or 4 times now, so it feels a little bit like coming home. Every time I come back. And in fact, I met one of the royalty who came to visit us one day, and I asked for a sneaky passport because I've been there so many times. It feels a little bit like I'm a local now. But Abu Dhabi probably ended up being the most challenging, because we went there with I think we went there with 15 people, and that was at the end of the shoot. And Denis was threatening production to go there with only 15 people, and production went, no, we can't afford to go to Abu Dhabi. It was a classic kind of can't do it. And he went, I want 15 people. And everybody thought this number would grow. And Denis was absolutely diligent about keeping 15 people, which meant we were limited by what we could do. But those limitations ended up being probably the best time that we had on the entire movie. It was just going from this big production to this tiny little film. It's been years since I worked with 15 people on a film set.
Chung, now you were shooting on location in the middle of Soho. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I never thought about I can shoot in middle of Soho because it's crazy, and then I don't drink. So, but it was amazing because we tried just catch it's real London, center of it's London, and then crazy Soho night. So, yeah, people should. I really worried about everything, but it was good, and then everyone enjoy, and then everyone very excited about we can shoot really in middle of Soho. So but lighting wise, I cannot set up big light it's anywhere because it's a permit issue, and then we cannot control it's every the load. But that's what I like, that the situation. It kind of it was great, but I don't know. It's I can shoot again the Soho. It was great.
Now, in the film, the story transitions between the present day and the 60s, and I know you had a workflow that involved the picture, sound, and the music. Would you talk a little bit about the process?
Yeah, the Edgar is crazy, so, and then he really care about music, and then he really care about how we can make it exactly sync music and then visually. So, and the choreography and then camera operator, we practice together every weekend. So it's my camera operator here. It's his body is remember every rhythm. So and then it looks like it's motion control camera, but it wasn't. So he remember every beat, so every rhythm. So and then lighting and the music and then choreography all sync. It was very big challenge. And then it was a hard time. So, and then even the one bit different, everything just crashed. So, but finally we did good things. So I think,
The trailer looks amazing. And I could imagine how difficult it was to do the transitions, but the trailer is beautiful.
Who is your operator, Chung-hoon?
Operator is Chris Payne. So he's really great. He's very quiet and very nice, and then he's another dancer. So kind of we call him another dancer because his camera is dancing together with the actor. It was very important. So now he's very busy. I'm not busy, but so
But this is very interesting because my Steadicam guy, he used to be a dancer. So during the dance numbers, he completely understood how to move with the actors, with the dancers, and blend with them as we were making the movie. So that's always very helpful, particularly when you're making dance numbers, to have a camera operator who's got either dance background or really good musical rhythm. Yeah.
Mm. Or also is good, like an athlete, great at sports. Our Steadicam up on In the Heights was cycles every day to and from work in New York, and we had all these, and I found like when we did live singing, he was able to the actors got to take their breaths when they wanted to, so everything had to be improvised, and the Steadicam operator just was able to improvise just by listening and watching. And I feel like it's the same with bicycling in New York City. You've got to be able to be really flexible.
Yeah, and then usual, I don't like Steadicam, but after last night in Soho, I really like. That is not just the Steadicam. My operator, his skill. It's not just the skill. He know about the music. He know about the dance. So really enjoyed. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Tragedy of Macbeth. Bruno, this is black and white with echoes of Dreyer's work on Passion of Joan of Arc. Would you talk about the approach to the look that you discussed with Joel Cohen?
How did we approach this? I mean, when Joel decided not to go to Scotland, I mean, to make a long story short, Joel called me, 3 years ago. He said, I want to do this little movie. It's 5-week shoot, everything on stage, and it's Macbeth. I said, okay, yeah, fair enough. So, and then it happened to be slightly bigger than what he wanted. But we shot everything on stage because he didn't want to go to Scotland, and he didn't want to go to any Tudor castle or English castle or wherever. And it was about theatricality, basically. It happened that, 5 years ago, he was asked to direct an opera, and he asked me to do it with him. And after months of discussing together, we realized that we didn't know anything about opera. I mean, and it was not really our field and our craft. We gave up, basically. I mean, he gave up mainly. And but all these discussions we had, 5 years ago were very useful when we start prepping Macbeth, because we said, okay, we know a bit more about theater now and theatricality, and now it's just to get rid of any ornamentation. So a wall is a wall, a staircase is a staircase, and that's more or less it. So it's not a Corinthian column or Gothic or whatever. And then it was really about the language of Shakespeare, which is very hard to understand for a Frenchman, as you know. And then that's it. So we got rid of everything we could, and it happened that when we watched The Passion of Joan of Arc, we said that probably where we want to go. So because basically when you look at it, you could say that the set are a way drier represents the English authority of Joan of Arc in many ways. So, because it's so pure and so dictatorial in many ways, or it's just like a tyranny. So we thought it was a good idea, even if we were not talking about fascism or something like that. I mean,
can I ask a question, Bruno? There's been a lot of film adaptations of Macbeth. I'm assuming you guys avoided those in any way, shape, or form, right? Or not? Or did you look at them in order to take or pick, or how did you go about that? Because the visual references are sometimes things that just are there that like how did you avoid things in that direction?
Thank you. We watched them all. In fact, I mean, there is basically 5 or 6 which are worth watching. And the best being obviously the Kurosawa one. I mean, for me anyway. So Orson Welles is a bit too theatrical in the wrong way from my point of view, even if it's a fantastic movie. And then the Polanski. So that's the 3 main one we watch. But we didn't use them as references. It was probably more about how did they answer a question. You see, for example, there is the dagger speech, which is a very famous speech for all Shakespearean actor. And we said, how did they shoot this? So, or how because it's a vision in Macbeth, it's not real. So how do you start thinking about the vision? How do you put it in image? So we said, okay, that's how Polanski did, or Orson Welles did avoid it totally in many ways. So they escaped the problem, you see. So it was more about the dramatic structures and then the look of it. I mean, the look of it is really, for me at least, it was really Bergman and Dreyer, very Scandinavian, and not so much German expressionism. It's very strange that people mention German expressionism. I mean, there is obviously Murnau and Fritz Lang, but it was more Scandinavian for me, at least.
Okay. Now, Haris, you also used black and white on Belfast, very different film, Kenneth Branagh's period drama. Would you talk about planning that look?
Well, Ken had written this during lockdown, and it was about his childhood. So once we came out of lockdown, we took a trip to Belfast. I'd read the script, was very moved by it. And it was quite an intimate process. He described his childhood, and we walked through the streets together, and I kind of saw it in actual situ. So we've made about 8 films together. So this was a side of Ken I'd heard fragments of anecdotally, but had never really been privy to the details of his upbringing. So it's hard to describe, but he financed it, wrote it, produced it. So we had no studio. We were really making it for ourselves. there was a need to make a film immediately after the lockdown was eased. So we shot last August, and it was driven by that. And what story would we tell? We would tell a very personal story. And I saw Belfast for the first time through his through him being a tour guide, really, and from a very, very personal point of view. This is where my grandmother lived. This is how I walked to school. These are the doors I sat out, and this is where my cousins lived. This is where I kind of played football. So that was quite a different approach to making a film than I've been used to. And what it did is it kind of opened up for all of us, I think, on the set, just a sense of what are our memories of our childhood, and how do you remember them, and how do you see them now? And in that regard, I think what we were interested in doing is trying to find a way that avoided distractions and took the viewer into a place where they could feel a lot of the emotions that are described in the story. And to that effect, we kind of concluded on a mixture of color and black and white. And we opened with modern Belfast and a kind of descriptive ode to Belfast. And I feel that color is a really, really kind of vivid, descriptive medium. You can tell if someone's eyes are blue, if it's autumn because the leaves are red, etc. But the more ethereal kind of human condition portraits I've seen seem to have a more direct, more lucid portrayal in black and white. It seems to allow the audience to know what the actors are feeling. And this is something we discussed with Ken in the past. We've also made partially black and white films in the past. We just finished Death on the Nile, which starts, the first 10 minutes are in black and white and in French. It was harder to get the studio to accept that the opening was in French than it was to shoot it in black and white, which was interesting. So we had already walked down that line in the past. But I think in taking things from memory and taking things from being recounted this story so personally, one of the things that struck me seeing Belfast and reading this story was, however difficult it was, there seemed to be a real joyful participation in all these sorrows. And that's quite a beautiful story. And that was something we really wanted to portray. So for me, I always need to latch onto something that's the essence of a story, to understand it. What are we trying to say here and get across here? And I feel that's the best place to figure out the look and the presentation of a story.
Ari, this Power of the Dog was your first pairing with Jane Campion. What did you discuss in pre-production, and how did you approach the look?
Yeah, this is Jane and my first big collaboration together. And it's a film that takes place in the 1920s on a very isolated cattle ranch. And essentially it's a kind of world where people can't talk about what they're really feeling. There's no one really has an emotional kind of intelligent, or like an emotional, the language to put words to. They're all going through their own kind of difficulties and challenges, but no one can actually talk about it. So it's a film with very little, I guess, like exposition in terms of the dialogue. And so as a result, it's inherently visual. So for us, it was kind of, how do you, what are the choices to get, I guess, like to find the visual manifestations of kind of what they're all going through. And Jane's so amazing at kind of symbolism and iconic images. We spent about a year together before we shot. That was one of the things that she really wanted to, was a kind of caveat when she first mentioned to me that she was looking for a DP for this book she'd read and was about to adapt, was that she needed someone to start she wanted someone to start pretty much straight away, and also to be able to scout in the locations at the time of year we would be shooting. So it'll be a year before we shot to go find the places. And yeah, I guess it was just the translating those big themes into a visual, kind of finding the frames that added more than just covering the scene, but kind of added a symbolism without going over the top, that feels like, oh, this is the symbol that means this. We really wanted also a film that would be a different viewing on the first time, and then if you were to watch it again, that it would be a very different experience, which is kind of, I guess, in the architecture of the plot, in that watching it the second time, knowing what you know, you can reinterpret things very differently. So that was important to us. And to, I guess, how do you, to make a film where the camera is not, I guess you call it like emotionally manipulative, where the camera is not telling you what to think, or kind of giving an indication of what you should be feeling, but leave it to you to put your own judgment and feeling. And because it's a film about, I think as well, about first impressions, that it's really satisfying as a viewer to watch something, make a judgment, and then later on realize that maybe you didn't get it 100% right. There's something really satisfying in that, versus a film that kind of tells you to feel a certain way and then shows you that it was different. You feel like you've been tricked somehow, like, oh, we convinced you of this, and then, got you, like it was actually wrong. There's a twist. So a film that was a very engaging experience for the viewer by having a kind of hands-off, non-judgmental camera, that hoping everyone could put their own judgments on what they were seeing.
We often talk about happy accidents. Would anyone like to share one from one of your films? Greg, I'm sure you have some.
Oh, I get asked that all the time. No, I don't have any, because the problem is my brain's like Swiss cheese. The second that happy accident happens, I forget about it, because then I move on to the next thing. So I don't know if I'm actually have an issue with my brain, but it was so long ago now, like pre-COVID, like there probably is, Carolyn, I'm sorry to be embarrassing myself, but we had plenty of, there was one little time I recall, I operate next to Denise. So I have a monitor next to Denise, so I can hear Denise process. There are times if I'm handheld, obviously I'm on the shoulder and he's near me. But if we're on wheels, then I was operating next to him. So this actor lands, and I won't name the actor because I'm basically throwing him in it, but the actor lands, he lands off his mark, he's on his mark, but he's leaning to his right. Therefore, he's blocking the shot that we wanted to get. And we both at the same time went, we both quietly went, oh. But then we realized what was going to happen was that as this character who was off their mark was going to leave, it was going to reveal the main character, which we'd never thought about doing before in this particular scene. And we both at the same time went, oh, interesting. So we both highlighted at the same time. Now, it turns out it didn't work out, because I think someone may have stopped the tape. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But how that ended, but it didn't end the way we wanted it to end. But we both had the same thought at the same time.
Alice?
On In the Heights, the end of the opening number, we push in to find our bodega owner in the middle of a sea of people. And the last shot of the movie is supposed to be us pulling back away from him. And we ended up, there's all these fire hydrants going, and we're at the corner of 175th Street and Audubon Avenue. The sun is setting. We have a little girl, and we are using fire hydrants. And we thought special effects was going to bring in their own water source, but it ended up that the hydrants are connected to all the apartment buildings. And so we finally got our fire hydrants exactly the way we wanted them for the shot, so that the crane couldn't pull out and not get wet. But every time someone flushed the toilet, the hydrants would fall over the place. And so now we have the setting sun, and we've done the move 3 times, and it feels like nothing. Like there's nothing emotional about it at all. And John comes over to me, and we had gone back and forth. Do we want, for months while we were prepping, should we push in or should we pull out? And we decided to pull out. So then he goes, we don't have any time. We have maybe 2 takes left. can we just push in instead? And I said, absolutely. So we reversed the shot at the very last minute and we push in and our rain deflectors fog up and you can't see a thing. So now we have one take to go and the sun literally is totally gone. And we push in and the little girl looks in the camera exactly at the right moment and we end on a close-up of her. And the sun is so low, like it's an hour past when we thought we were going to shoot the shot. And so all the lights, now we're almost wide open. All the lights in all the stores are brighter and more magical. And the sun ended up in the perfect position. And that never would have happened. And we felt something and we were so excited. So that was a very happy accident. I'm glad toilets flushing makes fire hydrants go all over the place.
I don't know. I'm cursed, probably, or doomed. I don't know. I never had any happy accident. When I did a sunset, it was overcast. When I went sunny, it was raining. So there was no happy accident.
But doesn't nature sometimes give you what it wants to give you as opposed to you forcing what you want of it? So isn't that, in a sense, that I wouldn't say a happy accident, but isn't that kind of the world telling you something that you should? I don't know. I mean, I've had my fair share of walking away with my head down and also my head up at the same time.
No, I don't know. When I was shooting Buster's Craig with the Coens, so we had all these monsoon storms, and all my plan fell apart. I said, oh, I'm going to follow the sun like that. And from noon onwards, it was pissing rain, basically. And so we have to shoot as fast as we could in the morning. So everything fell apart. But it doesn't make the movie worse or better. But it's, it's just because I don't understand the happy accident idea. That's what I mean. And I don't understand the emotional idea as well. I think the emotion is coming from the actor. It's not coming from us. I mean, I don't think so. We're doing something else, but again, it's a very strange thing. I think we are mistaking ourselves, when we are talking about emotion. I mean, light is rhythm; it's not emotion. I think. I mean, that's my feeling. But the emotion, I swear, when you have Denzel Washington as big as this on frame, it's not coming from me. I have done nothing. It's just Denzel Washington.
But you could screw that up though, Bruno. You could screw that up.
I did probably. Did.
But when you say you've got Denzel, and that's a good point. You're right. You can never. You put me in front of that camera, and you're going to have a very different emotional reaction. But you could potentially screw up that performance through the wrong underlighting, uplighting, top lighting, like no lighting. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
I'm joking when I'm saying all this, but I think we are making too much of a big point about it when I really think it's coming from the writing. If you have a beautiful written scene, how can you fuck it up? I mean, pardon my French, as you say in English, but I'm saying light is rhythm. And that's my feeling. And on the Tragedy of Macbeth, that's what I wanted to do. It's a music. So really, I was following Shakespeare line, and Joel Cohen, of course, and Denzel Washington and Francis McDormand. So, but basically Shakespeare, and we were modulating the light. And I truly believe that light is rhythm more than emotion. I think, and but. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. I mean, it's a different point of view. That's it. But
diversity has been an issue within the cinematography ranks. What is changing, and what progress still is most needed? Ari, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's I flip-flop between thinking about it a lot and not thinking about it at all. I mean, I get asked this question a lot, maybe because I'm a woman, and I don't know, I don't wake up in the morning and think I'm a woman getting out of bed and I'm a woman having my breakfast, or I arrive on set, I'm not thinking I'm a woman doing this. So it's actually not the question you're kind of talking about, but I don't know. That is to say, I think a lot is changing and there's still a lot to be done. I would love to get to the point where we're not talking about diversity anymore, and it's just like solved. Maybe that's in the future, or even the idea of a female cinematographer becomes like a ancient kind of term, like lighting cameraman or something. Like it just like fades out because no one needs it anymore. But I mean, I think the mindset has definitely changed. There's a lot more awareness. And then there's also the reality that it takes a long time to be trained. So it might be, might be a little while still, unfortunately, till we see what we really want to see, and that you can't actually rush that if you want to do it right. But I think what we can do, what's tangible, is every one of us, I'm sure, had a moment where we got a foot in the door, and there is a kind of always has been a kind of gatekeeper culture to filmmaking, that it's not the kind of thing you kind of need to somehow know someone, and no one really, there's no qualification you can get that will kind of just get you a job, or you're probably not going to get employed by someone that somehow doesn't have some connection to you anyway, or a recommendation. So I think what we can do tangibly as DPs, or what we can do now, is kind of create opportunities where we give like a foot in the door kind of thing to someone that might not otherwise have been a traditional choice. And then kind of once the foot's in the door, I guess it's up to kind of that person then to kind of hopefully once the foot is in the door, it can very easily be one thing kind of lead to the other, and it's a very organic kind of thing. I guess there's that gatekeeping thing, and then there is also something beautiful about the film industry. Like there is no qualification you can get in, but you also need no qualification to get in. So there is something kind of universally open as well, that if someone's talented, there's no if they get the foot in the door, then they don't need a really expensive degree or a kind of anything to get going. But I think there's also like a big other kind of bigger things like childcare and stuff that actually, like these bigger things, like if we're going to really support people, I think we need to have an even bigger conversation about kind of why is there not diversity, or like why might people not be able to be part of the film industry. It's not just that there's a gatekeeping aspect, there's kind of a systemic kind of thing. And on the other hand, I also think like it's not diversity for diversity's sake isn't kind of such an exciting thing as like where it doesn't have to be purely like altruistic. I think we are also missing out on all those great people that could otherwise be in the film industry. I don't know, if I think about, say, all the great gaffers I've worked with, we're just going to talk about gender and not even kind of race or the other ways that discrimination manifests itself. But I don't know, all the gaffers I've ever worked with have been men, and that's only half of the talent pool of the world that those people have come from. So I think about all the people that, if that job was open to everyone, that's like so exciting what we're missing out on, of these people that could be technicians or heads of department that could be incredibly talented given the chance.
This is slightly related but unrelated. Like I remember Jane Campion actually said, and this wasn't, she didn't say this to me, she said this, I think, in an interview years ago. When she went to film school, there was 50% women in film school. 50% of the directors were women. This is in Australia. And then when she left film school, I think she ended up saying there was 2% of the population, 2% of the directorial population were women in that particular section of time. And that obviously just highlights at that point the huge drop-off that occurred in Australia. Now, Australia isn't the entire world, but it's, I guess, representative. But, there's obviously that gap that Ari is talking about why is that gap occur? I mean, I've never been a minority or a female, so I can't say, well, that this is the reason why. But I can say that, where I came from, Melbourne, there were very few female DPs that came up. Mandy Walker was, she was a few years ahead of me, and like she was such an inspiration to me. I mean, not as a white female, because I wasn't a white female, but just as a butt kicking kind of kick ass, awesome sort of leader, making images, and watching her. I mean, it inspired me. But I imagine if I was a woman at that time, that I would have been even more inspired. That suddenly there's no limitations.
It's, I mean, things are changing and it's encouraging, and luckily, like, I feel very grateful that the last few years I've worked with directors that it's really, diversity is ingrained in them. It's part of who they are. And on many times for years and years and years, I was the only woman in a Scout van, and then on Tick Tick Boom, Lynn was almost the only man in the Scout van on that movie. And I mean, he just hired so many women and so many different, people of color, and who came from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and all different backgrounds. And it was really, really a lovely experience to be in that world where diversity was just there and no one talked about it.
I think just for me, it's a female DP and then the men's DP, and then it's any color people DP. It doesn't matter for me. It's who have talent that's more important, and then who understand the movie is more important. Just a human is a human. So,
as of this recording, you're a few days away from voting on whether IATSE will ratify a new contract. But throughout the negotiation period and even before it, there's been a lot of attention on the subject of rest periods and turnaround time. Bruno, I know you're among the cinematographers that recently signed a petition urging the studios to address the topic. Would you elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time that, Askell Wexler just was doing already something decades ago. So I think in many ways, the whole system is kind of not falling apart, but, we are kind of expandable in many ways. Even if I've been treated very well by any producers I've been working with. But you can see that working 16 hours a day doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. When I work with the Coens brothers, you do 12, 14 setup a day, and you work 10 hours and or something like that. And we say that after 10 hours, we're tired. What takes us 5 minutes to do takes in the morning, take us an hour in the evening. So it's kind of ridiculous in many ways, and so it has to change. But the main thing is people shouldn't die because they work long hours. I remember it was years ago when I was shooting in New York, and a guy fell asleep on driving his car, and he died. He had a car accident, and he died. So it doesn't make any sense. It's only movie we're doing. We are not surgeon saving lives. It's only a movie. So the whole thing is a bit unbalanced now, I think.
Well, only a movie. I have to interject right there. I think movies are essential to who we are. And I have to speak from my own perspective. And I don't want to trivialize what it means to make movies. I mean, make movies can change people's lives. So it's tragic that someone died making a movie, but it's big what we do. We're changing people's lives in terms of storytelling and telling them about all these beautiful things that can happen to them. So I'm sorry, Bruno, not to be rude, but it's too bad. It's horrible that people die as we're making the movies, but it's a big deal for me to make a movie.
It's a big deal to me as well. I mean, I've been doing this for 45 years now, and I still believe that. I mean, there is movie which changed my life, Right. So and I think there is movie that I hope there is movies that I'm doing that can affect life, maybe
Right.
not change the life of people who are watching them. No, I believe in art. I believe in movie making. I mean, no, I believe in movies, and but there is something where there is a limit for me where I said, okay, it's too much,
Right. Individuals should not be exploited.
Nobody should die working on any kind of job, basically. You see, and after working 20 hours a day, I mean, I think it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's an issue of being exploited by the system. And clearly we're at the point right now where we're trying to stand up against the system that's been structured to have minimum 14 hours and pay us well, but at the same time demand total dedication. And as we're getting older, as the world is changing around us, we're trying to rebel against that system. But it's a good rebellion. It should change. But it's a tough thing to deal with all those changes, particularly now during the COVID, where there's so much money being spent on the COVID, and somehow they're trying to justify the long hours by saying we need to somehow make up the financial reality of what we're making, financial reality of making movies during the COVID. But at the same time, when you were younger, 14, 16 hours, I worked for Roger Corman when I was 32 years old. I mean, we were working 16, 18 hours, and we loved it. Fortunately, nobody got hurt, nobody died, but the passion we had was different than we have right now when we're getting a little bit older, and it's a bit harder to get up, and it's harder to go to the set, and do 16 hours. I completely agree this needs to change, and particularly for you who grew up in Europe. I grew up in a different part of Europe, but growing up in that part of the Europe where your personal life, your family life, your comfort is more important than anything else. In America, unfortunately, the crews work, live for work, and those are the best crews, and we should fight to limit our commitment to 12-hour or 14-hour day and change that to something that's more humane to some degree. Because
again, it's not because I think we should have a life beside working. That's all I'm saying. So I have a daughter, and I basically haven't seen her for when I was working. I didn't see her. I saw her when I was working in France. You see, in the evening, I could see her. When I was working somewhere else in London, I couldn't see her. So I think it's important to have a life beside, and that's the beauty of what's happening in Europe in many ways. I mean, especially in France, where you work much shorter hours. Even if I haven't worked in France for 17 years, but when I was doing Amélie, at 6 o'clock, I was home, 6 p.m., so, and we did, something. But it's all about this for me at some point. And it's not about to fight against the producer or something. It's just, okay, slow down a little bit and give people's lives, because you can't catch up with your children when they, the year you've lost, not seeing your children, those years are gone. So they are gone. You see what I mean? It's just
my children are gone. They don't want to talk to me.
I was going to say, I think what we're talking about is the very end result, and I can't count the number of times I've almost I've had to pull over and sleep on the side of the road because I thought I could drive home, and then turns out after 20 minutes you're actually fucking exhausted. But we're talking about the very end of the chain when you're driving home is the decisions that led to that, in my opinion anyway. I feel like they go back to the start of the chain when someone decided, we have a script, we want to make it, this is how much we think it's going to cost, and then this is how much we can get for it. And then there's a decision at some point that says well, let's make it anyway. And the people that they'll we'll just figure it out, and everyone will cut 1,200 corners and we'll get there. And I do love the spirit of that, but the reality is really, really difficult and dangerous. And I don't know, I feel like, again, a systemic kind of bigger thing of at what point do we say unfortunately we don't have the money to make this movie, or what do we need to change to make the same movie with the same spirit and use some kind of what we're really good at, which is problem solving and kind of how can we tell the same story and change some fundamental things so we can make it for the money we have, rather than everyone, all the crew kind of having to compensate somehow for that. I don't know. It's difficult. It's not easier.
The point that Janusz made about the passion when you're doing 16-hour days, Janusz, is very right. And everybody who's talking here has that passion or has had that passion. Every one of my crew members has had that passion or have that passion. And I think the point that Bruno's getting at, which is very real, is that that the current production stance, they're feeding off that passion. And there are people willing to work those 16 hours because they love films. They love, that's life-changing. But the problem is that we as DPs, okay, we work for a chunk and then we might have a little bit of time off, or we might do some other things. Directors might have years off to make a living in the crew realm. And I don't agree that we're well paid in the film industry. I mean, maybe everybody on this Zoom call are probably better paid than the normal, but I don't believe we're well paid. I think you look at the hours that people are working. You look at what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to go to different countries, to go to different states, to be jet lagged every single Monday morning when they've worked until 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Like we're taking chunk of people's lives. Now, so is Starbucks, who are paying their barista, the minimum wage. But the point is, there's limitations on those jobs, and no one's passion is to be a barista, or very few people's passion. But people's passions are to be a DP, to be a director, and I don't know. I think we're feeding on those passions. I say the industry is feeding on those passions, and I think what the union does really well is it's going to do well after we all agree on it. It's going to put limitations in place that say, okay, you can have your passionate crew, but here's where they've got to go home. Here's their turnaround. Here's their pay, so that at least we're protecting the most vulnerable on our crew who they wouldn't say crap. I mean, you look at that stuff in New Mexico, the camera department walked because, but that's a rarity for them to walk. And yeah, I don't know. It's something I'm quite passionate about. Having worked, guys, in London, for example, where you go past midnight and the crew gets an extra day's pay. That doesn't happen in America. So there's no reason for American producers to stop the shoot at midnight. And so what do you get? You get predators.
Yeah, well, we are exploited. And then if you look at the movies 20 years ago, there were 3-4 producers. Now you look at the movies, there are 16 of them. So, the things are changing. I mean, it is a tough business. The prestige is gone to some degree. We're being replaced by colorists. And really, as long as you get an image, you're done. You are DP. You have an image. Whoa, congratulations. It's in focus. You are DP now. So the artistry of the profession is on the total decline. And yes, the crew should be compensated. And yes, we should not work 16 hours. But man, there's another 30 people behind you right there who will say, yes, we will do 16 hours.
Not if there's a union stopping it, though. Not if there's a union. I mean, listen, I'm not a hardline unionist, but I also believe that, and I also know I'm realistic. I've worked all around the world, and I know that if in Los Angeles the union says you can only work these hours, producers are going to go somewhere else that's not Los Angeles, and I realize that, and it's a problem, But if we get together as an entirety, as a big group, then at least there's caps put on it, And
we agreed to a shitty contract just now. I mean, entire group. We all voted against signing the deal and going on strike. And what happened is we're overruled by those who make the decisions. So all that, collective power, it doesn't work for me, because we have power to say no, and yet we're overruled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are big issues with that contract. Anyway, I try to stay unpolitical with all that stuff. I just try and imagine it top line. Do you know what I mean? Like I imagine my second AC or my trainee or my loader or my first AC, the amount of time they spend with their children.
Reality is, if you want a conventional life with your families and children, man, you're choosing the wrong job. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's a total commitment. You're working 12 hours, 10 hours. And, and it's a profession that requires tremendous compromises, as we all know.
Yep, it does.
And if you're not able to deal with it, unfortunately, you need to move on. And I'm not saying that it's right the way it is. It's completely wrong. And I'm tired as well and all that stuff. But it's, we are circus performers. We go all over the world and make movies. If you want 9-to-5 job, that's not the profession you should choose.
No, but we're not talking 9 to 5. If we were talking 9 to 5, then yeah, we'd go back to the Starbucks analogy. But we are circus performers, but we can also have balance. And again, I think that part of the union's goal, well, again, success or not, is to help with that balance. Because I agree, we're always going to work those hours. I mean, after 10 hours on set, I don't come home and watch, Beavis and Butthead. I read the next day. I prepare my references. We all work those hours, and our families do suffer. And it is it is something we just need to help protect. And as DPs, we have some voice in that. You know what I mean? Like we have at least a voice with producers, not much. And I would like to believe that we fund the thing, so we voice it, but we have some voice. So if we can all use it collectively, I think, I don't know, we can help things.
Greig, you referenced the issues, something I'd like to talk about, which is the issue surrounding the recent tragedy on the set of Rust in New Mexico, when cinematographer Helena Hutchins was fatally shot with a prop gun which was discharged during a rehearsal. An investigation is ongoing, so we don't know the details of what happened on that particular set. But overall, do you think sets are safe, or do you think new safety measures need to be put in place?
I mean, I think yes, overall the sets are safe. I mean, I haven't been on an unsafe set, and if I have, I've said something. So, you know, I don't think broadly you can say sets are safe or unsafe. I think that's kind of too black and white. You could say, are the roads safe? I mean, well, with seatbelts, no drinking and driving, and airbags, are they safer? But I believe the things we're talking about right now are making things more unsafe. And as Ari just pointed out, it's not just each individual answer or question. It's the end result of 50 people or 100 people all being absolutely dead tired in week 7 of a shoot because they've only ever they're all jet lagged because of the Friday thing. I mean, that's the easiest low-hanging fruit to talk about because everybody's jet lagged. Humans are jet lagged. Humans get into a rhythm and then they get jet lagged for Monday morning. So week 7 of that, then you start getting into unsafe territory where people are maybe making decisions about things. And when you've got a schedule to keep and it's an unmakeable schedule, you know, the thing I hear about the Coens, and tell me if I'm wrong, Bruno, is that, like you just said, that there's a 10-hour day and they make it fit into that time. That's a rarity.
Alice, you were actually among hundreds of cinematographers that recently signed a letter urging a ban on all functional firearms on set. Would you elaborate?
So I signed that letter. I go to bed at night and I close my eyes and Helena's face is staring at me. I am incredibly affected by what happened. And I slept in my daughter's bed for a week afterwards, just holding her all night long. I signed that letter because we all, as we've just been discussing passions. So I knew I wanted to be a DP when I was 15 years old. It is completely my dream life. But I have 2 dreams and I have both of them. The other was to be a mom. And I have this wonderful little girl. And the fact that Helena doesn't get to go home to her son ever again, the fact that her son doesn't have a mother anymore, that's why I signed that letter. I strongly believe we all should go home every night and feel safe and not have to have anxiety or fears that we are working in unsafe environments. And so that's why I signed the letter. I feel very strongly that there's no need for a real firearm on set any longer. And I've worked on all different kinds of sets. I mean, I shot indies for years and years and years and years. And on Tick, Tick, Boom, I have never felt more cared for as a group of people than on any other. It was the most amazing experience. We started pre-COVID and then we shut down for 6 months after 8 days of shooting, and we came back and everyone's safety was the top priority. To the extent that we have this live stage show, and an atmosphere was decided. It was decided we couldn't use atmosphere because we were one of the first movies to go back, and how would you feel if you had a mask on all day and being in really thick atmosphere? The crew was put front and center on all the decisions that were made, and it was and in the end, it was a remarkable filmmaking experience where collaboration and ideas were shared in a really, really safe environment. And so I can see that it can happen. And
I was going to add one thing. I guess it's kind of an aside, but and I feel like, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but I feel like I'm always fighting for just like enough prep time for something, like just to get the shoot day, but then also like people always ask like, oh, how long was your shoot? But then how long did you have to try and prepare for that shoot? Once the clock starts ticking, it does something to everyone's on a kind of another frequency. Like, I don't know if it's a solution. It's not directly related, but I don't know. I would also say like there's value investing in the prep time so that everyone can go in prepared and with a good plan to say, like you're saying, Bruno, like the solutions, they probably exist before the day. Once the clock starts ticking, it's really hard it's much harder to speak up. It's much harder to think even. I mean, we all know how to think fast, but some other better decisions can be made earlier and say like let's make a plan so we can do a reasonable amount of shots per day, but that also requires investing in the prep. And it's not directly related, but it's part of a whole ecosystem.
Would you also talk about how safety was handled on your set, Ari?
Yeah, I mean, I felt very, very safe. I think one thing we have in Australia, I'm not sure what other countries have it, but we have a safety officer who's always on set, and they're on the tech, they're constantly there, and that's their job is safety. And when someone's getting strapped onto a tracking vehicle or going up a ladder or anything, there's a safety person whose job it is to look out for you, because it is also hard to assign, I don't know, to say the grips are in charge of safety. Everyone has an element of safety, but everyone also is doing their job, and having someone from the outside is also, I don't know, I think there's value in that. We do really difficult, supposedly dangerous things every day, but for the most part, sets are a very safe place when we follow the protocol and when we have time to do it properly. There's a way to make films safely, and then it can also easily go wrong if you don't take the time and do it by the rules that we know kind of work. We know how to do it safely. I think we all know how to do it the right way. Then whether that gets done or not, that's a whole other thing.
Bruno, when you shot Buster Scruggs a few years ago, that's just one example where the filming involved gunfire. How was it handled on that set?
I don't remember, but there was no accident. So there was a lot of security. I mean, no, it was handled properly, I think. I mean, seriously, I think the American set are probably the safest I ever worked on, because they follow very strong regulations. Sometimes it's ridiculous. For a European, you said, God, yeah, seriously, I cannot climb on this ladder because I didn't pass the test or whatever. You said, it's sometimes it's too much. But on Buster Scruggs, nothing happened. We had horses, tents, all kind of stuff, and weapon as well, but nothing happened really. But I think there is, movie making is not an exact science. You see, it's not mathematic. Every movie is special. Every movie we do is, at least for me, it's a different adventure. So. And it's not about the budget. It's not about anything. It's as if you were starting from scratch every time, and you're trying to do your best with the crew you have, with the money you have, with the script you have, with the director. So you try to build something. But there is something which are important, which is, as you say, Harry, it's just the prep is important. Following the protocol, the COVID or the gun protocol is important, because that's safety, that's health, and everything. But and prepping is, I always say as a producer that it's better to pay me another week working 6 months ahead with the director and the producer and the production designers, and having the full crew just trying to sort out of problems that we didn't solve before. So it's but on different movie is different different solution as well.
Can I just add one thing? Like, I think that, I mean, from my experience, I don't know about everybody else here, but like, I've been very fortunate to be working on productions that are incredibly safe. Like, I've been, and I think maybe the rest of us are the same. We're all, we're at a level, we're working with directors that care, we're working with producers that care. I've felt very supported in any time I've mentioned something or I've never felt unsafe. But I'm watching other sets and I'm hearing other stories, as Alice just sort of pointed out. And it's those stories we need to kind of watch. It's those things. It's those people we need to keep our eyes peeled for and help, because we've all come from a place where we've done small indies with no unions and very low budgets, and we've all taken risks. I can't tell you how many risks I've taken in my life when I was especially a younger DP. We have to watch those sets. We have to help protect those sets.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, and I think I don't want to be political because I'm not a politician, but you can expand the whole thing and say the movie business is only one part of the global, business as a whole. In France, the social fracture is going like that. There is more richer people and more poorer people. You see, and there is no middle class anymore. So you see, I mean, it's that's what's happening all around the world. And you could say there is big budget movie and there is low budget movies. There is nothing in between, more or less now. And the whole balance is it's kind of a social fracture, if I may say, And I agree with you. I'm one of the lucky one, really. First, because I worked with producers who do, who respect every protocol. I've been fortunate to work with amazing directors who are very supportive of everything. But as you say, Greg, we have to be careful for the young DP coming and the young crew as well, and the low budget movie as well.
I think it's quite simple in the issue of rust. A loaded firearm of any sort, whether it be a blanket, etc., has no effect on the cinematography or the outcome of a film. It only has an effect on the reaction to an actor. So it's very easy to react. I believe it's as simple as that. We don't need loaded firearms on a set. They could always try acting, for example. It makes no difference to us. It's only to the actors. It's as simple as that.
So you concur with the banning the guns, that's all?
Yes, because Janusz, does it make a difference to you whether or the photography or?
I'd be very happy not to make a movie with another gun.
Exactly. They can try acting. It's as simple as that.
For the last question, I actually just wanted to ask you to look toward the coming years with these issues, as well as the impact of the pandemic. What permanent changes do you anticipate seeing in production?
I mean, as a just seeing a bit of a shift in the way we prep a movie. We scout films now. We may not have to get all on a plane and scout to a foreign location all at once. We could work with 360 cameras and virtual headsets, and nothing's quite the same as standing on a plane in New Zealand, I'm sure, Ari, with your director talking. But to actually see city streets in advance without having to waste the world's infinite energy sources. So I guess that try to be more frugal and more economical with our choices. So I think that's going to happen. And I even think that virtual production's a bit of a it's a bit of a hot buzz term at the moment, where everyone likes to fly a flag that they're doing stuff virtually, but there are real benefits to that, for some things, but not everything.
That's interesting. There's definitely something to be done about ecology and not flying, and having
I agree.
a green set. You see what I mean? Just like, how can we build a set which is totally green, or how do you say?
Beautiful in some way, not just like trashed and chucked out. I agree. It's kind of, I feel sick. I feel nauseated by the amount of waste I see on set, even just, try and find a recycling bin on a film set. Like it's either it exists and it's like full of not recycling. I don't know. That would be incredible. I think the film industry has been really slow, but it'll be lumped with the dinosaur industries if we don't do something soon to kind of make ourselves sustainable. Anything that's not sustainable is by its very nature like not sustainable. It's a tricky one.
But again, this is where also we have to, I hope as DPs, we have a bit of the ability to change that. Like I was on a production of 5 years ago and there was issues with plastic bottles on set. Like everyone's taking the high road and going, we don't want plastic bottles on set, which is a fantastic high road to take. But then when I wanted to do my lighting order, the difference between LED space lights and 6K tungsten space lights, the difference in price was massive. So of course the producer, being economically responsible, wouldn't allow me to have the more expensive light, which actually used far less electricity, which might have saved them in the long run with power and all that stuff. So there's got to be some balance. Studios saying we want to be green, but they've also got to go, well, actually, no, here's our flight limit, how many people we can fly and how many times you can go to a location and how many private jets the actors take or how many kilowatts per day you're allowed. Now, obviously that's going to limit us as DPs and you never want that to people to say, no, you can only use 25 kilowatts a day. But if we don't have choice, then at least, how can we make those choices?
I think as long as we embrace change, right? We're all storytellers and we'll find a way to continue being storytellers as long as we continue to embrace the changes that are happening in our world.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us.
Thanks, Caroline.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you very much.